Bungie has just released a brand new article called Bring the Thunder inside Arc 3.0, where they detail all the new Arc changes coming in next week's update. This year has been about revamping the light subclasses. We had Void, Solar, and now it's Arc's turn. Today we're going to recap everything you need to know, including a new Hunter Super, dodging as a Titan, and sending out Ball of Lightning melees as a Warlock. You won't want to miss this. So what's new with Arc 3.0? Well, Bungie says what Arc is all about. Arc is really just that, go fast and hit stuff. When we asked about the core fantasy that powered the Arc 3.0 revamp, we call it the whole W subclass. Everything is just built around moving forward and enabling aggression and those abilities. So before we get into the specific classes and their Arc abilities, let's talk about those buffs and debuffs that are key to the Arc 3.0 experience. First up is a new buff called Amplified, which is key to the Arc 3.0 experience. An Amplified Guardian is faster, both in terms of movement speed and in terms of their weapon handling, and also more agile, able to perform long slides that can function as a devastating setup for some of the attacks that follow. Unlike other damage type buffs, players won't need to equip any specific aspects or fragments to become amplified. By default, all Arc subclasses become amplified after rapidly defeating targets with any Arc damage, and those equipped aspects and fragments offer additional ways to become or benefit from being amplified. After sprinting for a few seconds, an Amplified Guardian will gain another boost in speed, gaining a sizable PvE damage resistance buff and enabling an even longer slide ability. Even if a player is no longer amplified, as long as they keep sprinting, the speed booster buff will stay active. On the debuff side, Arc 3.0 is bringing two to the party, Blind and Jolt. Blinded opponents in PvE won't be able to see, naturally, and will also be disoriented and unable to fire their weapon. In PvP, blinded opponents will have their screen whited out and their HUD removed for a short period of time, alongside a ringing audio effect simulating the ringing in the ears after a flashbang explodes, so basically a flashbang in the Crucible. Jolted opponents who are damaged will periodically send slivers of chain lightning out to nearby enemies, damaging them in the process. Arc 3.0 also democratizes Ionic Traces, which were previously available only to middle tree Warlocks. Now available to all, traces are objects that, when collected, will add energy to all of your abilities. Now that we're familiar with the basics of the Arc 3.0 debuffs and buffs, let's jump into the specific classes. First up, the Hunters. For Hunter, the team imagined the graceful warrior monk, giving the Hunter the ability to get in close quarters quickly and effectively to make a mess of their opponents in the process. For Hunters, we wanted to reward staying in close and being safe while you're in close quarters with an enemy, which is very difficult to do in a lot of our content. We wanted to give them tools to stay alive while they either closed the gap or were in melee combo. That came primarily in the form of giving them crowd control tools. To that end, the Hunter's Arc Staff Super is returning. With Arc Staff, it's kind of the same as before. Hunters will be able to block and deflect projectiles with a press of a button, as well as perform an armored dodge where upon dodging, the Hunter is more resistant to incoming damage. The Hunters are also getting a brand new super though, called the Gathering Storm. Here, the Hunter will leap into the air, hurling their staff into the ground or an unlucky enemy like a spear. Upon impact, the staff emits a damaging burst that jolts nearby enemies. Soon after, a giant bolt of lightning strikes the staff and overcharges it, creating a large damage zone around it for several seconds. While overcharged, the staff sends out arcs of lightning to damage any enemies that move near it. On the melee side, the team is keeping the Hunter's Combination Blow ability, feeling like it was right in line with the graceful warrior fantasy that they were going for. Kills with Combination Blow will refund dodge energy, increase melee damage, and restore a small amount of health, allowing those skilled hunters to chain their dodges and melee attacks into ballistic bursts of beautiful fury. Disorienting Blow also returns. Here are the 3 arc aspects hunters will be able to choose and customize from. First up, Flow State. Defeating a jolted opponent causes you to become amplified. When amplified, the hunter's dodge will recharge faster and make you more resistant to damage, and you have quicker reload times. The second aspect is Tempest Strike. Allows the hunter to perform a sliding melee that launches an arc wave along the ground, dealing significant damage and jolting enemies in its path. And lastly, Lethal Current. After dodging, the hunter's melee lunge range is increased, and their next melee attack jolts the target and creates a damaging lightning aftershock. When used with the Arc Staff super after dodging, the hunter's next staff light attack hits twice. In addition, hitting a jolted enemy with a melee attack will blind them. And finally, Arc 3.0 will also bring back blink movement for the hunters. Let's now move on to the Warlocks. For Warlocks, they say we wanted the player to feel like they are channeling the power of a storm through their body, controlling the storm, controlling lightning like an elemental conduit. 2 supers will be available for you Warlocks: Chaos Reach, where players will be able to shoot concentrated beams of arc energy out of their hand to decimate opponents, and Storm Trance, which is more akin to the image of Palpatine floating around the world firing electricity from their fingers. This super combines both the landfall behavior from the previous bottom tier arc, creating a damaging shockwave underneath the player, and the iconic blink behavior from the old top tree arc, allowing the Warlock to teleport briefly during their super. Warlocks will have 2 melees available, both utilizing the powers of lightning. The Ball Lightning melee will send out a floating ball of arc energy that detonates, zapping enemies down from above. Chain Lightning will send out arcs of lightning to strike and jolt the primary target and chain damage to surrounding enemies in the process. The Warlock's whole thing is that being amplified modifies their abilities. It powers them up, they say. For Ball Lightning, if you're amplified, the arc ball will fly out and zap enemies 3 times instead of just the normal 1 time, so you get more damage out of it. For Chain Lightning, it chains to more targets. Here are the 3 aspects for the Warlocks. First up, Arc Soul. The Warlock casts a rift to create an Arc Soul that will assist the player in battle. Allies who pass through the rift will also earn an Arc Soul. The rift charges faster when allies are near. And while amplified, any Arc Soul you have or gain is supercharged, increasing its rate of fire. Next up, Lightning Surge. The Warlock activates their melee while sliding to transform into a ball of lightning and teleport forward, calling down a field of lightning bolts at the exit point that jolts targets. And then Electrostatic Mind. Arc ability kills and kills on arc debuffed enemies create Ionic Traces. When you collect any Ionic Trace, you become amplified. And lastly, we have the big bulky Titans. The inspiration for the Titans for this arc revamp was the lead with your fist bare knuckle brawler and the freight train. You don't get to move the Arc Titan, they say, they move you. The Arc Titan's ultimate goal is to punch you in the face, and so a lot of what we did for the Arc Titan was try and figure out how we facilitate fist-to-face contact as much as possible. This first manifests with some of these supers that are returning, Fist of Havoc and Thunder Crash. While Thunder Crash is practically unchanged from before, Fist of Havoc now has an adjusted slam radius that's halfway between the top and bottom path, and the ground slam now leaves a damaging field in its wake. While slamming from the air, it'll cause a damaging area of effect from the previous top tree behavior. In the case of Thunder Crash and other abilities, uncoupling a subclass's abilities from the old subclass Diamond system will result in some substantial buffs depending on how players use it. One of the biggest changes coming to the Arc Titan is the new Thruster class ability. By double tapping a button, the Titan bursts in their throttle direction at speed, performing a quick first-person evade comparable in distance to a hunter's dodge. Arc is a damage type that is about mobility, so if we're going to add a mobility boost anywhere for Titans, it was going to be here. For melee attacks, Titans will retain the Seismic Strike shoulder charge, which blinds enemies. Performing a Seismic Strike while amplified will increase the radiance of the blind, and the blinding effect will also last longer. Ballistic Slam is also making a return, where players can slam the ground after sprinting in the air, creating a damaging explosion upon impact. Those melees will be joined by a brand new charged attack known as Thunderclap. Here, the Titan player holds the melee button down and charges up arc energy that can be unleashed in either a quick powerful jab or held and built up to be unleashed in a furious One Punch Man style blast that will devastate an opponent. The charge state cannot be stored and the Titan must be on the ground to charge this punch. The damage is pretty significant though. A 90% charged Thunderclap will one-shot Guardians in PvP. But the reward will be balanced by the time it will take to build up that charge level and the fact that you must remain stationary to charge it, always a dangerous move in PvP. Like other subclasses, Arc 3.0 Titans will have 3 aspects to select from. Touch of Thunder is the first one. Improves arc grenades in the following ways. Flashbang fires an additional blind impulse on its first bounce. Pulse. When the grenade damages an enemy, it creates an Ionic Trace for the Titan. Pulse grenade damage increases over time as the grenade lingers after impact. Lightning grants an additional charge for lightning grenades and jolts targets on initial blasts. And Storm creates a roaming thundercloud that moves and tracks enemies, similar to the Stasis Hunter's Silence and Squall super, firing lightning bolts at the ground underneath it. The second aspect is Juggernaut. While sprinting and with full class ability energy, the Titan gains a frontal shield that blocks incoming damage. When amplified, the shield is stronger. Once the shield is depleted by taking damage, the player's class energy is depleted. And lastly, we got Knockout. Melee kills trigger health regeneration and make the Titan amplified. Critically wounding an enemy or breaking their shield increases melee range and damage for a brief period. The Titan's base melee becomes arc empowered while Knockout is active. To complement class-specific aspects, Arc 3.0 will also introduce a suite of new fragments. These will offer new perks to build upon, as well as add bonuses or penalties to your Guardian's intrinsic stats. Here's a look at a few fragments to come. Spark of Beacons. When the player is amplified, Arc special weapon kills create a blinding explosion. Spark of Resistance. When surrounded by enemies, the player has increased damage resistance. Spark of Momentum. Sliding over ammo will reload your weapon and grant a small amount of melee energy. Sliding over heavy ammo increases the amount of energy granted. And lastly, Spark of Shock. The player's arc grenades will jolt enemies. So anyway, Guardians, that's what we got for Arc 3.0. They say if you want to see this, they'll jump into it, next week with the stream and then obviously when the season releases. But this gives us a lot of information, some new supers, new abilities, and some new ways to rain some arc havoc down on your enemies. If you'd like to stay up to date on everything going on with Destiny 2, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, I thank you very much for watching and I'll catch you all in the next video.